Good evening, everybody. Hi. Welcome back to the church. Hi, Neil. Hi, Susan. Hi, everybody. I'm Sherry Pascarella, the Executive Director. I'm here just to give you, thank you, April, a couple of notes. I'm getting like a positioning cue. First and foremost, we wish to acknowledge that we are in the unceded territory of the Manhasset, Montucket, and Shinnecock tribes who continue to have a presence, an important presence in our community and our land, and we remain grateful to all of their labors. Also, I would like to extend a Happy New Year and Happy Holidays to those of you who celebrated this week. And lastly, I would like to ask you to silence your cell phones for the benefit of today's fabulous and important speakers. Don't really need much of an introduction in this crowd to men whose commitment to our community in Sag Harbor is jaw-dropping, and I'll just leave it at that. Please welcome Eric Fischl and Tom Gardella. Mayor Tom Gardella.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Hello. Mine works.
Thank you, Eric, for inviting me to share my experience with the village and whoever's in attendance. Yeah. So I appreciate it.
Let me just tell the audience how this thing came about, just to set it up. It was Tom and I were talking on Main Street a while back, and got into an area of his past, his military past, talking about his intelligence training, and how he had to sort of see and analyze different aspects of military installations, of possible bad actors, etc. And I got interested in the idea of how one trains their eye to see, that level of looking is about detail and being able to distinguish something that is benign from something that is less benign. And so we were talking along those lines. And I also had this sort of feeling like this guy, not only is he our mayor, but he's our neighbor, and there's a lot about his life I don't know anything about. And I thought it would just be interesting to have a conversation, a public conversation that is introducing him in a way that maybe a lot of us don't know him in. Starting from, I think I saw a picture of him as a very small child. So we're going back. We're going to the log cabin days. But all with some interesting stuff, and then just see where the conversation goes as we move forward. So
okay,
with that I'd love for you
ready to get started.
I am so
all right,
ready.
So we'll start with the
I'm buckled in.
First picture. So that's me, and on the that's me on the left. But that's my grandpa Gardella. That's in the house that I grew up in, which was in Center Moriches, but it was owned by my other grandfather, Angelo, both these men were very different, strikingly different. And if you know anything about history, both sides of my family from Italy. My grandfather's parents, my other grandfather's parents were born in Italy. The Gardellas were born in an area just outside of Genoa, which is northern Italy. My grandfather Angelo, his family was born in Sicily, a place called Carini. And the only time I had never seen these two men together. And that's his house, my grandfather Angelo, but he was in the hospital at the time. He was very sick, and he passed away not too long after this picture was taken. But and as you could see, my grandfather Gardella was always dressed properly. He's always had himself put together. The Gardellas were a little more standoffish, a little more reserved, whereas the other side of my family, the Cocuzos, that was their name from Sicily.
Is that
Very,
Austrian?
very boisterous, very,
Right.
you know, hugging, kissing. You know, I was taught at a very young age, there's your uncle, kiss him, because you never know when you might not see him again. So give him a kiss. So very, you know, two striking contrasts between the two families. But I loved both my grandfathers and respected both of them. And yeah, so we lived in this house for quite some time. I think I was around 9 years old when we had moved. My parents sold the house, and we moved to another area from Center Moriches to the Shirley area, William Floyd School District. And that's where I, you know, spent my middle school and high school years.
Yeah.
Wait, oh, I hit the bad button. There's a picture of me and my sister Connie. I was the oldest in my family. That's my sister
What's
Connie.
the age difference? A couple of
She's
years?
2 years younger than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I had a brother, I don't have a picture of him, my brother Matthew, who's, let's see, probably 15 years younger than me.
Oh.
Yeah. That's me on this was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I caught the unicorn. You can't see it, but that's a unicorn. So we traveled, as I was telling Eric, my family didn't have many resources. We weren't very rich. We didn't, you know, we were working class, I would say working class poor, and we would travel, you know, a trip to Hershey, Pennsylvania was a big deal. Sometimes we would go to New Hampshire to visit my mother's cousin, who was a teacher up at Keene, New Hampshire. He was one of the professors up there, very bright fellow, and we would visit him every once in a while. But that was the height. So I led a pretty, I would say when I was a kid, you know, I stayed in the, you know, in the Northeast. We didn't really travel that much. So this is my daughter posted this. That's a picture of me in jump school at Fort Benning, Georgia. So as I was telling you about how I got into the military, when I was in high school, my senior year in high school, my father became very sick, very ill, and the family didn't have hardly any resources coming in. And I can remember this vividly. Waking up one night, my mother was at the kitchen table and she was crying, and I went in and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know how we're going to survive. You know, we got to figure something out." And I took that to heart. I went to my school. I was working part-time. I went to my school. I talked to my principal. I said, "Look, I'd like to take a year off and work and come back next year and get my diploma." And for some reason, after I told him what was going on at my house, he accepted that. But he said, in order for me to let you do this, you have to get signatures from each one of your teachers, which was tough because I had to go to each teacher and explain to them why I needed them to sign this piece of paper. And pretty much most of my teachers accepted it, they signed it, they understood. I had one teacher who was giving me a really hard time, Mr. Basio, who was my science teacher. And he just said, "This is not the right decision, you're not gonna come back. This is a bad decision, you're a good student." And finally I said to him, you know, after listening for a while, I got angry and I said, "Just sign the fucking piece of paper so I can, you're the last one left." But he had good points what he was saying. So I went to work, and I worked full-time I was working probably 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week at the local diner, which was a hot spot, you know, for my kids in my class. So
This was before your dad died, or?
no, he didn't. This is before he died.
He
He
was
was very sick.
sick.
Wasn't collecting any disability or anything at the time. So anyway, I had spent that year working. When the school season came around again, my family was starting to collect money. He was starting to get his retirement, some disability, so the family was getting on its feet. I went back to high school. I went back to William Floyd. I got my diploma. I graduated in 1983. And I graduated in June, at the end of June, and in August 4th, I was in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. But meantime, I had gone to the recruiter by myself, had signed up to join the Army, to be a military policeman. My dream was to go to John Jay College to study law. That wasn't going to happen. We didn't have the money, or there was no resources to do that, so I figured my best bet was to join the military. At the time, I think it was the GI Bill that would pay for college. I figured I would do that. So I took the test, what they call the ASVAB test, and scored extremely high. When I got to Fort Hamilton, the recruiter that was there said, "Why do you want to be a military policeman? You scored really high. Your country needs you to go into military intelligence." He said, "I want you to go downstairs and take another test for language." So I went down, I took the test, I scored very high. So he said, "We need you to be an intelligence analyst, imagery analyst. You have an airborne option," and that my eyes lit up. Airborne, that sounds exciting.
Had you ever jumped?
No, I had never done that before. No. I was just a crazy kid that was into motorcycles, and Evel Knievel was one of my big heroes. I set up a little jump when I was like 11 years old and crashed, and the kids went crazy, yay, ruined my bike, but I fixed it. So anyway, I wound up joining, getting 96 Delta was what they call the MOS, and I was in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, went to basic training. After I got out of basic training, I went to what's called Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which is up in the Painted Mountains in Arizona. The local town is Sierra Vista. But this is the first time I had experienced this. I don't know if anybody here has experienced it. But when you go from, say, an elevation like Long Island to an elevation that's 2,200 feet, the air is much thinner. So even though I had graduated basic training, I had not gone to jump school yet. When you get there, you have to acclimate yourself because there's no air. You start to run, you can't breathe, so it takes a couple weeks to acclimate yourself. And I spent probably a year, just over a year, going through training, and they taught us, and this is where I met I'll show you in the next picture, I met my future wife, Debbie, my ex-wife now, but I had met her, we were in the same training. This is a social media post that my daughter posted on Veterans Day. And
what kind of intelligence was she in?
She was in the same class as me.
Same thing.
She actually sat behind me. And what kicked it all off was I brought an apple to class. I put it on her desk, and that's how I broke the ice with an apple. So
smooth.
I think we've come a lot. That was, we're talking early 80s. So
back when apples were apples.
When apples were apples. Must have been a really good apple. But she became pregnant, and she got out of it. Can you believe that? Not from the apple. So she became pregnant with our first child, Gina. She got out of the military. I had shipped out to Fort Benning for jump school. And she was in the process of getting out. And I can remember, when you go to jump school, it's very intense. We had like 700 people in our class, only 150 graduated. So I hadn't spoken to her in a couple of weeks, and we finally got a chance. They gave us a few minutes to make a phone call, and I called her, and she answered the phone, and I said, "Hello?" And there was dead silence, and then I heard her crying. She said, "I thought you were killed. I thought you crashed. I hadn't heard from you." So I said, no, I'm fine. But she got out, and then we both lived at Fort Bragg. And my daughter was born at Fort
something where
Bragg.
if you're pregnant
You have the option. You can stay in.
or go out.
And the interesting story is once I got my wings, what we call airborne wings, and I was shipped, my orders came to go to Fort Bragg. While I was in jump school, we had the invasion of Grenada when Ronald Reagan, I gave him the order to go into Grenada. And the interesting story about that is my MOS, which is the Imagery Analyst, Intelligence Analyst, the photographs that they had analyzed had showed that the Cubans were digging in. There was a military presence. They were starting to build a military presence there. So I'm in jump school. I graduate. I go to Fort Bragg, and there were three people: myself, the first sergeant Macmillan, and the secretary who was pregnant at the time. Were the only people left from my unit. The rest of my unit was in Grenada.
Yeah. Did you want to go and just didn't qualify for it at that time, or
I don't think
happy to?
I don't think anybody. I can't say going through a military experience. I wouldn't say that soldiers want to go. It's part of their job. It's a mission. Right. You're trained to do something. That's what you do.
Right.
So I didn't have a feeling either way. If I had to go, I would go. If not, then just be prepared for the time if it does happen.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, growing up and being in that limited area of us traveling, being in the military definitely exposed me and opened my eyes up to a broader, here I am with all these different men and women from different areas of the country. Mm-hmm. I think there was one or two black kids in my school. Now, the military is very much integrated. Now I have officers, sergeants who are African American who are directing me, telling me what to do, and it's definitely something I think that every young person should experience. Right. My first Sergeant Macmillan, when I called him when I got to Fort Bragg, his first words out of his mouth: "When was the last time you ate? When was the last time you slept? And do you have gas in your car?" So that's the thing I would say about my experience in the military is that we all, the most important things to us were the people that we served with. Mm-hmm. So.
Did you work on the imagery for the Grenada?
I didn't work on it, no. I was still in training. I just graduated jump school.
Yeah, I remember that war, but not remembering seeing imagery that would justify. It just seemed like. No,
I actually saw the pictures. Yeah,
the Caribbean.
They were digging in. They were. Yeah, they were starting to. So the main reason of that invasion was, I believe there were college students that were being held up at the university. Right. Or being held hostage, and it was a rescue. Yeah. So. Yeah. Let's see. This is again. My daughter is Gina. That's my maternal grandmother, Connie. That's my wife, Debbie. This was when we came home, and that's at her christening. I had grown a little bit of a mustache, as you could see.
Yeah. What is that on the wall behind you?
That's some wallpaper.
It's a wallpaper. Yeah. Wow. You look good in a mustache. What do you think?
That's a long time ago. And this is, of course, one of our fire scenes. So when I got out of the military, I wound up back in Long Island. My parents had actually moved out here. So I decided, okay, let's go out where the family is. And
you moved out here to Sag Harbor?
I moved out to, actually, I was in Noyak. The Fran Schiavoni, young Fran, not old Fran, who was my boss, who has passed away, God rest his soul, who was also a mentor of mine. But young Fran had come over to my mother's house to fix something, and the refrigerator was making a noise because the water line hadn't been charged or connected. It makes this buzzing noise if anybody has a refrigerator that doesn't have water to it, where the solenoid opens, not to get too technical. But my mother said my son would usually fix that, but you know, he just got out of the military and he's looking for a job and he's doing odd jobs. And Fran was like, he just got out of the military and he's looking for a job and he knows plumbing. Here's my number, tell him to call me. And again, I was struggling. Didn't have much money, and I remember it was my first or second. I think it was my second day at work. I ran out of gas on the way to work. I ran out of gas on the Sag Harbor Bridgehampton Turnpike. So I left the car on the turnpike. I was in work boots, and I started to run to the shop, which was on Germain Avenue. And I'm running, and this guy pulls over. He's like, "You need a ride?" I said, "Yeah, I need a ride to work." He says, "Well, where do you work?" I said, "I work for GF Schiavoni." So he kind of smirked, and I thought, well, what's he smirking at? He drives me to the shop, and now I'm thinking to myself, how does he know where the shop is, you know? So he says, "All right, here you go." I said, "Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the ride." I said, "Tom Gardella." He's like, "Stephen Schiavoni. Nice to meet you." So Stephen, I don't know if any of you know Stephen, but he's a local carpenter contractor, and I had, you know, like a month later gone on to one of his jobs. Now I'm meeting Stephen again, and he sees me and he goes like this. I say, "Yeah, thanks for the ride." But, you know, look, Fran and Gabe were great bosses. They were mentors of mine. I have a lot of respect for them. And one thing that they did not like is if you were late for work. That was made very clear. So luckily Stephen came along and I wasn't late. But yeah, so that's where I started my plumbing career. And Fran comes up to me and says, "I think you should join the fire department." I said, "Oh, fire department, you know.
Was that all?
Wonder if that's exciting as jumping out of planes." Well, let me try it. And
Was that all volunteer at the time?
it's
or?
all, yeah. What most people aren't aware of is that 70% of all fire departments in America are volunteer. The other 30% are paid departments. Some of them are paid and volunteer combined that are in the major cities. So Fran suggested I join. Fran was a member of the Montauk. He signed my application. I think Francis, I call him Francis Anthony, that's Fran's son, was also in the Montauk. Yeah, he was. Beaver Early, I don't know if you know our former superintendent Beaver. He was in the fire department. He signed my application and became a member of Montauk Hose.
I grew up with a kid named Beaver Shipley. I can't believe that there's more than one Beaver.
Yeah. Yeah. His real first name is James Early. But, yeah, and then I started my career in the fire department, and I slowly moved up the ladder. I was very active in the beginning. Went to all the pancake breakfasts, did all the work, and then I became an officer. Eventually, became an officer, and let's see. You see me with Tom Horn Sr. I don't know how many people remember Tom Horn Sr. Right? Used to sit outside the firehouse, sell raffle tickets for the fire museum, which I'm glad that April and the partnership has stewarded that, and we're in the process of raising money. Thank you very much.
That's a really exciting project. So we talk about that a little bit more later.
And you know, Tom was one of those. Some of the old-time firemen, ex-chiefs, wouldn't really talk much, but when they said something, you better listen. And he was one of those guys. Like, you knew if he came up to you to give you advice, it was for a good reason.
What was some of the biggest surprises in training for the fire department, for fire?
I think that, well, there were a few actual classes that were that are very intense. Mm-hmm. One of them is the mask confidence class, where you have when you have all your turnout gear on, your mask, your Scott pack, which is your oxygen tank, and what they do is they put you in a room, and the room is, there's fire, they create a fire, and then the fire, obviously the hot gases go up to the roof and they start to bank down. And you have to get as low as you can. There's that low area of where it's safe. So you're basically on the ground with your face
So you
on
can
the ground.
see, I mean, you're low to see, or?
Well, yeah, that you could see. They have a slight opening where it's venting out, and you're in that safe area, which is about 2 feet, 2.5 feet off the ground. And what the instructor will say is, so that, you have to have confidence in your equipment. He'll say, take your glove off and slowly put your hand up, raise your hand up. And once you get, to that 6 inches above that area, it's like you're putting your hand in an oven.
It's a fog.
So that was an intense class. I've been in some search classes like that where you're searching for fire, and the team that you're with, sometimes people panic. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing you could do in a fire is stand up. It's the last thing you want to do. And I've been in a couple of incidents where people have panicked and freaked out. And I had one where the person that was with me took off and left. And I had to keep, it was a basement fire. This was up at Yaphank in the training center. And I kept going. I found the fire. I put it out. And the instructor, I didn't know this, he was hiding in the room. He knew where the fire was. And once I put the fire out, he came up to me and grabbed me and said, "Where's your backup?" I said, "I don't know where the hell he is." I said, "He took off, and he had to find his way back out. And the way you do that is you follow the hose. You just grab to the hose and just follow it back out." And he grabbed me, and we took 3 or 4 steps. He opened the door, and I was outside. So
What
those are some of
the guy who ran?
He got a tongue lashing.
Wow.
This is on the cover of, how many of you know the Sag Harbor Neighbors magazine? That's with 3 of my daughters. That's my little dog, Vlad. I figured he needed a big name for a little dog, so I named him Vlad. That's my youngest, one of my younger daughters, Lucy, who's a traffic control officer in the village. That's Gemma next to her. That's myself. And then my daughter, Angela, who's a student now at FIT.
Oh, yeah, you were mentioning that.
In the city.
What is she studying there?
She's in business fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So those of you that know me know that, I tend to be, my political views are on the conservative side. My daughter, Angela, happens to be the liberal one in the family, and we happen to have these really brisk discussions back and forth. And it always ends with the last conversation we had, "I love you, Papa." And, we learned, that's how I learned something from her. Maybe she learned something from me. And
So it's not, "I love you, Papa, this is the last time we're ever going to talk to each other"? We're not going that route.
No.
Okay.
no.
Good to know.
But she's in the city and living in the city and going to school. So very proud of her. Very proud of all my daughters. So
How do you go from fire to public service? And
So that's interesting because my last year as fire chief, I sat down with the then Mayor Sandra Schroeder, and I was giving her an overview of the department, basically showing her what the budget was, what I expected or I could foresee us needing expenditures in the future, what our current state was. And as I'm giving her this report, she's just looking at me and she says, I want you to run for trustee, on my ticket with me and deputy mayor at the time. And I said, I have to think about that because, all the time I had spent with the fire department, I was thinking maybe I need a break. So finally I said, okay, I'll do it, which I shouldn't have done it, because if you're not 100% in and you want the job and you want to do it, you should not be running for office. And I did absolutely nothing. I didn't campaign. I didn't go to any events. The day of the election, I was playing golf in Shelter Island with the VFW. I came back and I lost the election by 5 votes. Aiden Korish, as you know, who's an excellent trustee, had beat me. He ran a great campaign. He was very proactive, very energetic. And I remember at the end of the election, you know, people like, oh, you should challenge. I'm like, I'm not challenging that. And I walked up to Aiden and I shook his hand. I said, I'm here for you. If you need me for anything, you can always come to me. I'm willing to help you. I want to see you succeed. And I said, after that, I'm like, I'm done with politics. I'm not doing this again. I'm riding around in a plumbing truck, fixing, people's toilets or whatever problem they have. And Robbie Stein had called me after the election and said, look, I'm not running again next year. I think you should run. I said, I don't know, Robbie. I don't know if this is for me. I got to think about it. And then my phone rang, and it was Jim LaRocca. And Jim said to me, all he said to me was, I'd like to talk politics with you. I'm thinking, Jim LaRocca, why does he want to talk politics with me? Can you meet me at the corner bar? So we sat down, we started talking, and he said to me, I'd like you to run with me when I run for trustee. So I did some hard thinking. I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go in 100%. I'm not, I love the village. I've been serving the village. This would be the next step for me to help the residents of the village. So I ran, was elected with Jim, and served as trustee for 1 year with Sandra. She was up for re-election the next year and lost to Kathleen Mulcahy. So about a couple of days after Kathleen won the election, I get a phone call from Kathleen saying, I'd like to talk to you. So I went to her house, I sat down, and she said to me, I want you to be the deputy mayor. I said, you want me to be the deputy mayor? She said, yeah, I've talked to a lot of people, and I haven't heard anything bad about you. I want you to be the deputy mayor.
Compared to all
I
the
said,
other
well,
deadbeats in the
yeah, I'm like, I don't know who you're talking to, but you're not talking to most of the people. Anyway, so I became the deputy mayor under Kathleen's administration, and let's see, this is us as a young family. That was at Gettysburg. Happened to be a big Civil War buff and studied the Civil War, read all kinds of books for years. I actually talked at the school. I did a talk about the Battle of Gettysburg to the students in elementary school. That's my son, Thomas. One son and with 5 daughters. So you can imagine how he grew up. He's very quiet. Anybody that knows Thomas knows he doesn't have much to say. I wonder why he's very quiet.
Still got the beard?
Who? I don't. Mine's gone.
Your son?
No, I think he might have a little bit of a beard. That's me.
I thought that was you.
No, that's me. That's me on the left. My son's the little guy in the middle.
Okay. You look good in a beard. You should maybe think about it again.
No, it's too gray now. And this leads me to my next point. I think a year into Kathleen's administration, we get hit with COVID. And this was very early on. And you see how running ambulance calls. And the way I got involved with the ambulance, as an officer in the fire department, you get called to the motor vehicle accidents. They might not call out the whole department, but they do call the officers out to help direct traffic for the ambulance. And I was being dispatched to these calls. Some of them were very serious. And I would get to this, sometimes I would get to the scene. I was the first one on scene. And I felt I could be doing more. If I'm there, I'm there directing traffic. There's somebody that's injured in a vehicle. I should be able to administer, yes, first aid or even even more, more for, a medic, become, learn more about medicine, be able to help. And that's when I decided to join the ambulance. So I joined the ambulance corps and went to the EMT course. A few years after being an EMT, they had, or what they have now is what's called a critical care EMT, which is pretty much the same as paramedic, except we have to call medical control to give certain meds. And we can't do, whenever we do a 12 lead, which is an EKG, we have to transmit it to get confirmation, or there's a back and forth with the doctor, whereas the paramedics don't have to do that. So I got certified as a critical care EMT, and lo and behold, COVID hits. And that was tough. In the beginning, it was extremely scary because we didn't know what this was we were dealing with. I remember taping off the benches with now Chief Drake, who was lieutenant at the time, because people were congregating. We didn't want that. We shut down the coffee stations. I don't know if you remember all the, safety measures that were put in place.
We opened the church, and then COVID right away. Closed it right away, so
yeah, it was tough.
we know the impact was pretty terrifying.
I went on WLNG at the time, and I was communicating the numbers and directives from the state and the county, just to try to keep people informed. But
did we lose a lot of people here?
I was actually involved in the first fatality of COVID. There was a call in the middle of the night, and this story is crazy. My daughter had just become an EMT, and she was on, my daughter Gemma, and she was on my squad. We get the call, and at the time what they would say is the house is under quarantine. They wouldn't tell you who in the house had COVID. But when they told you the house was under quarantine, that meant that somebody in that house had COVID. Showed up to the call, 90-year-old gentleman, cardiac arrest. Somebody was on top of him. I found this out during the call, that he was a doctor doing chest compressions while one of the police officers is giving oxygen through a BVM, which is a bag valve mask. And he didn't have that type of mask on. I had that type of mask on, but the police officer didn't. The gentleman giving him CPR, which was a doctor, giving CPR on a mattress, which is not going to work because you're pushing the person into the mattress. So anyway, if you know anything about EMS, you have a team that has certain duties that they perform, and it's my job to direct, as the critical control or the squad leader, direct them what each task was. And I directed my daughter. I said, I want you to gather the information, patient's information, date of birth, medicines, past history. So I threw the doctor off. I said, get off him. He's like, I'm a doctor. I said, I don't care. Get off him. And he's in the corner, and he's giving me directives. I'm not listening to him. He was obviously intoxicated. But we get the gentleman down. It was on the second floor. Get him down the stairs. Get to the bottom of the stairs, and the daughter comes out and says, we have a do not resuscitate. So I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, why did you call us then? And I need the paperwork. Can you get me the paperwork? Oh, I have to find the paperwork. I said, I got to go. I can't wait around for paperwork. So we got on the ambulance. We got to the hospital. The gentleman was what's called asystole. It's just flat line the whole way. I did everything I could. I gave him epinephrine. I gave him the meds according to protocol. Still could not resuscitate him. You cannot shock an asystole rhythm. Get to the hospital. One of the nurses comes out, a male nurse, John, and says to me, what do you got? I said, John, I got, asystole the whole way. These are the meds I gave, and, I don't think he's not going to make it. And he said, okay, what's his name? So I turned to my daughter. I said, you have the information, and she just looked at me. This was her first cardiac arrest. She froze. So I went like this. I put my head down, and John puts his arm around me. He's like, "Don't worry, Tom. He's dead." And as he says that, here comes the daughter comes running up with the DNR
With the paper. Wow.
and hands it to me. And again, I said, "That's his name." But the doctor came out afterwards, right after. There was some commotion because one of our team members wasn't wearing the N95 mask, and one of the other, and I told him, "Stop it, knock it off, stop arguing with each other." Doctor comes out and says, "I just want to let all of you know that that gentleman was COVID positive." So I immediately called the chief of police and said, "You better get your guys checked out." They didn't have a mask.
Get the doctor checked out.
What's that?
You didn't get the doctor checked out who was
The
giving
doctor?
him CPR?
Well, the doctor knew he was COVID positive.
Oh, he did. Okay.
So, but the story, the whole story with that, and this goes into the whole COVID effect, was that that gentleman had flown from California, had gotten on a plane, COVID positive, flown from California to New York, was at a dinner party in East Hampton, was sneezing, his nose was running, he was at a catered party. He infected the caterer, got COVID. The caterer went home and infected his mother. His mother died 2 days after that gentleman passed away.
Holy shit. Wow.
So that's what we were dealing with
Yeah.
in the beginning. So we at the time, we had ordered a machine. It came shortly after that would sanitize the ambulance. We didn't have it at that time. We had to stay and take that whole ambulance apart and clean everything in the ambulance, scrub it down.
Wow.
Dressed like that so that we didn't get infected. So it was a tough time. It was.
Yeah. And what was going on in the village and the administration at that time dealing with COVID and stuff?
So there was, we were doing, had certain precautions in place to make sure, we were keeping up with the directives from the state. We actually, Save Sag Harbor helped us. We got the vaccine. They had volunteered, some of the ambulance members volunteered to get that initial vaccine out, which I believed helped us. The initial vaccine, I feel, helped us because we didn't have that herd immunity. There was none of that going around. We needed something to get us boosted up. And we actually at the American Legion were giving people the vaccine, which I believed helped. And yeah, so we, as it was, the directives came down from the county and the state. I was on multiple phone calls with Steve Ballone and the other representatives, telling them our situation. Graduation, I pushed for the Pearson School to have graduation outside. The current county executive, Ed Romaine, joined me, put pressure on Steve, which we didn't really need to do. Steve was a great county executive. He went to the governor, spoke to the governor. I think other areas did too, and they allowed us to have the graduation, us and other schools that were in a certain group, 200 students, 250 students. So
Was that the year that they posted all the photographs of the graduates?
that's it. Started then, and then
around,
we had circles where people could
yeah,
sit.
that was amazing to see that. Yeah.
So it was a scary time.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. So, how many of you people know who's in that photograph with me? John Avalon. So John, just so you know, I'm a Republican. John's a Democrat. I met with John. We had a really good discussion. John told me where he was coming from. We don't agree on all the issues, but I like John as a man. I think push come to shove, he's going to do the right thing. And I supported John over Nick LaLota. I'll tell you a funny story. John calls me up and says, "Tom, I got a problem." I said, "Well, what's going on?" I'm supposed to be at the Noyak Civic Association meeting for a debate. and Ann Welker was supposed to be my surrogate. She can't make it. Can you go and be my surrogate? Lalota's not going to show up. He's busy doing it. Just go there and tell him, where I stand on issues and just talk to the people. I said, sure. So I go up there and I'm talking to everybody in the audience, telling them where John stands on certain issues. And who comes walking in but Nick Lalota? And I ended my talk. I said, I am not here to disparage any public servant. I'm not going to talk negatively about anybody. That's not why I'm here. And that's not what John would want me to do. John wants you to know where he stands on these issues. And then you make a decision as far as where he stands and who you think the best candidate is to represent you. I'm going to vote for John Avalon because I feel he's the best man for the job. And I sat down. I got a few dirty looks from Nick. And then Nick went through his routine, and we left. And John called me the next day and said, I can't believe you showed up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. I said, it's fine, And no, we have a good friendship. And like I said, we don't agree on everything. I mean, we were talking about this in the break room. How many happy, successful marriages? Do you agree with everything your wife says? Or, I
agree with everything April says.
Yeah, all right, well, there you go.
Just for the record.
But look, if you want to talk about national issues and stuff like that, that's what the problem is. We're getting into this tribal area where people are just going into their corners. They're not talking. They're not engaging. There's no dialogue. And to me, that's not the country that I was born and raised in.
Yeah.
There's a way to do that respectfully. It's respectfully disagree, but yet let's move on. Let's do what's best for our communities, for our country. That's what's important. So
at some point we're going to open it up to some questions, but before we do, one thing that has been clear to me both in our private conversations and in this one is your life seemed to have always taken a path towards public service, which is not a guarantee with anyone that would be the way they would go. So can you talk a little bit about how you found that pathway and why?
that's interesting because people ask me, well, why do you volunteer for the fire department? Why do you do the ambulance? And I can't really come up with an answer. It's almost like you say, you're directed in a certain area. I happen to be a man of faith. I happen to believe in God. My life, things have happened that I don't think anybody could explain. There's things I've seen that, I think that, as I said to you, when I get into bad moments or moments where I get angry or angry at certain people or certain things, always somebody comes into my life to steer me back. And this community has done that. People in this village have supported me and have always been there for me to keep me in a certain, in that state. And, being on the ambulance, dealing with people one-on-one, sometimes in their worst moment, you get a feel for that human feeling. Like, we're here together, let's help each other, let me get you through this.
Yeah.
So,
That deserves a clap for sure.
This was a bizarre, I gotta tell you about this meeting real quick. This was a bizarre meeting. I get a phone call from one of Kathy Hochul's aides saying, can you meet the governor at which used to be the Southampton Diner? I think it's the lobster thing. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Can you meet her there like in an hour? I was like, is this like really? She's like, yeah, she wants to meet you. So I was in a meeting, I left, drove to Southampton. I figured I was going to be there with Fred Thiel, Jay Schneiderman. It was going to be this, local photo op. I go to the diner. Half the diner's closed off. I walk in. The guy says, "You Mayor Gardella?" I said, "Yes." Go ahead, go right in there. It was nobody in there, just the aide. I sit down, 2 minutes later, Bill Hochul walks in. How you doing, Mayor Gardella? Bill Hochul, nice to meet you. The governor will be here in a couple minutes. You know, I'm looking around. Is this a hit job? What's going on here? Is this like Michael Corleone getting taken out? What's the deal? So 2 minutes later, in comes Kathy Hochul. And, you know, I'm sure she knows my politics. We had a really good conversation. And despite, you know, like I said, I could disagree with things that she's doing or some of her positions. But I will say, Kathy Hochul cares about, she gets up every morning, she cares about the state. She's doing what she thinks is the right thing. So I gained a lot of respect for her in that meeting. She comes from small town politics upstate. Mm-hmm. So it was a really good conversation that we had. So it was one of my, I guess, one of my political moments.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. She was asking me about what projects we were doing in the village, what my vision was, what I wanted to see done. I explained to her what we were trying to do. She gave me some numbers to people to contact to help us. And I believe we got some state aid. Bob Plum's here, one of the trustees. We did get some state aid from that conversation. I think we got $200,000. So it helps. Every little bit helps.
We got a question, right? Wait a minute. Here's a...
Oh,
No.
thank you. Okay, so for many decades, Sag Harbor has been a haven for artists, writers, educators, visionaries. And I feel that Sag Harbor could also be a haven for the future of solar panels and solar energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to know if you have any ideas about that. I mean, I have this vision of the entire rooftop of Pearson High School covered with solar panels. Why not? It's cheap.
Look, my opinion on that is we should tap into all the resources we have. We should push solar, push wind, use whatever oil we have, whatever gas. I've gone to the last conference I went to, New York Convention of Mayors, when you speak to these small town mayors upstate, some of the mandates that have been put on them to go to electric is really causing them a lot of stress. Conversations I've had to them is like, our power plant is at 99%. How are we supposed to do this? So I think there needs to be a major investment in the infrastructure, in the grid, to accommodate all the electric use that we're going to need. As you know, AI is it's big now. Those centers are going to take up a tremendous amount of electricity. So I think that we need to push whatever green energy we have. We need to get away slowly. I think that this radical idea is not the way to go. We need to go at a certain pace, because most of the people that are affected when we go radical are the people at the lower income. You know, and people around the world that are, you know, you're in a third world country. You're worried about where you're going to get your next meal. You're not worried about solar energy or green energy. So I think we have to look at it, you know, really take a close look at the problem. And I don't believe we should be stopping any green energy programs. I think that's not the way to go. We should be pushing for everything.
What did you say, Nada?
North Sea has started.
Has started.
There's a solar farm there. I
Yeah.
met, yes,
Rebates are coming.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't oppose that.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, the problem we have with the
Oh, wait a
solar is
minute, there-
it's a historic district, so the ARB, you know, they won't allow the solar panels on historic houses. I could do a lot about the ARB, but
Thank you for your tremendous leadership and public service. It was very moving hearing your story, and we're lucky to have you as mayor. Given climate change, what are your thoughts about what Sag Harbor can do to mitigate flooding?
the way I look at it is, it's all about the individual's choice. My thing is to educate people, make them aware of what the problems are with the environment, with climate, and most of the time, if you educate people and show them what the better choices are, they're going to make the better choices. I don't know, when I hear I'm sorry, but when I hear climate change, I'm like, now I'm supposed to fix the weather? Like, I can't do that myself, but I think individually, if we all make the right choices, then it's going to help. I look at I don't know if you remember, we had a problem with Freon. We had a problem with the ozone layer. You remember when this happened? It was, believe it or not, during the Reagan administration, right? We made, that administration made certain changes to phase out the R22 Freon because it was damaging the ozone layer. If you look at it now, the ozone layer has repaired itself. So it does work. There are things we can do to make a difference.
When you look at the flooding that happens with certain weather,
Right.
are you looking at investments that the village can make?
We are looking at the storm drains are a big one, what they call MS4. And, my concern is a lot of that goes into the bay. So if we want to filter it, or if we want to, that's going to slow down the rate that it goes out. So it's a big concern. And we have engineers that will look at it to see what we could do. My goal is to have no drains go out to the harbor. That's a big concern of mine, is what goes on in that water, because we're completely surrounded. And the Cornell Cooperative, I've supported them. They have the eelgrass farm that's in our harbor. I actually met them at an event for Carla Race. They were there in the corner, and I was like, "What is this?" And I started talking to them, and I said to them, "How can we help you? What do you need?" Without missing a beat, she said, "We need money." I said, "All right." So I went to a few people that are good at fundraising, and we got them enough money to continue on the eelgrass. Matter of fact, we got them so much money that we were able to do an oyster spat off of Steinbeck Park. And that's going to be monitored. So I think you have to be proactive when it comes to these things, to the harbor. Monitor what's going on. How can we help? How can we affect positive change? So just to sit back and, it'll take care of itself. I don't believe that. You have to keep an eye on it.
Thank you for all the help that you gave your life up to. I'm a resident of Sag Harbor for 40 years, and obviously there's lots of changes. And we often with friends talk about negatives and positives. I'm just very curious. Is there something that you feel throughout Sag Harbor you would like to see improved, that bothers you, that we all can help, or just, I don't know?
Well, look, parking's always been a problem, right? And my thing is the paid parking that we have, if we keep it, my thing is I don't want that to reflect negatively on the village residents. I don't want them paying for paid parking. I don't want anybody in the 11963, North Haven, Noyak, parts of East Hampton that are part of our village. I don't want them affected negatively, which is why we came up with that sticker system. But I think there's more that we could do there. Can we create parking? There are some areas we can create parking, but again, there's so many people in the village. At what point is enough enough? You have to also consider that. Traffic is a problem. We just had a traffic study done, and we're about to do a parking study, believe it or not. A traffic study, we had monitors put out recording traffic in multiple areas throughout the village, around the flagpole, where Bay Street comes into Bay Street 114, that intersection, around the flagpole, the intersection where the Civil War Monument is, that's a tough spot. Spring Street, behind Main Street, traffic going over the bridge, coming from the bridge. So we approved this study to monitor it, to record the patterns visually, and also we had monitors put on the ground. So I'm waiting to get that report and see what suggestions they make to help the traffic flow.
Just a quick story about traffic. Several years ago, the Sag Harbor Partnership gave Nada Berry the Lifetime Achievement. And she, in her speech, read 2 articles from the Sag Harbor Express, or whatever it was called, in 1949. And one was complaining about summer residents, and the other was complaining about the traffic.
You know, the one thing, I will say this, for somebody like me that was able to come to this area, work hard, save money. I actually shared a house with my parents, and I went to a first-time homebuyer seminar by then Suffolk County National Bank. And they went through the whole process, and I saw that I was not at that, I hadn't saved enough money, I hadn't built myself up enough, so I took the folder, I threw it in the closet, and I started to work really hard and save. 2 years later, I took the folder out, I filled out the application, I went down to Suffolk County National Bank. People said, oh, you can't go to the bank, they're not going to give you a loan. I gave them the application, I said, this is what's in my bank account. And he looked at me, he looked at the application, he's looking at me, he's like, where did you get this? I said, 2 years ago in Riverhead when you had that first-time homebuyer seminar. And he just smiled. He said, I'll call you. I said, I'll go through it and I'll call you back. And I walked out. I was like, I'm not getting it. And sure enough, he called me back and said, you're pre-approved for $140,000. And that's how I bought my house in Sag Harbor. I paid $115,000. But the problem today is the young people today, how's that going to happen? So affordable housing is a big issue. And we were able to, because of the Community Housing Fund, you remember the tax that we added on, the 0.5%. Because of that fund, funds were created. We had funds that we had collected, our affordable housing, from the watch case factory. Every time they sold a unit, we got funds. We had about $1 million, just over $1 million. East Hampton came in for $1.5 million, and we were able to purchase 109 Hampton Street, which there's 4 apartments in there. It's a Victorian, I don't know if it's on the corner, it's a big Victorian house. That will remain affordable, those apartments, in perpetuity. East Hampton Town will manage it and run it. But that is in this village, I don't know where you're going to build affordable housing. I don't see how that's going to happen. But we're losing those, as those houses come up for sale, we're losing them. They're being bought out, those people are being displaced, and it becomes an investment property or a part-time home. So we have to identify those homes and then try to step in and purchase them, especially if they're multi-unit. I think the cinema on Suffolk Street,
11
same
Suffolk,
idea.
Yeah.
So we're 2.2 square miles. If we're going to try to tackle the affordable housing, we need to preserve it where it is. That's the number one goal. That's the way I see it anyway.
Do you see the village going more in terms of its economy, going more specifically towards a resort town kind of economy with, Airbnb stuff and second home et cetera, summer.
Well, I think that we should resist that. It has to be a balance. We're going to lose our base. And if we lose our base, I think we're going to lose our identity. So we changed the code.
How do you identify the base? What are you, when you say base, what are we talking
People
about?
that have lived and work here or live here year round. We have, look, my family, 2 of my adult children live in my home. Mm-hmm. So where are they going to find housing if they want to become part of the village? We changed the code, we changed the code to allow accessory dwelling units to become, for housing, accessory apartments. So we're trying to help. We're trying to increase that stock by not too drastically changing the character of the village. Yeah. So, Jack Lyons made a great presentation at our last board meeting with this ADU It's a studio ADU that can fit on a piece of property. The game changer with that is, the concept is there's an AI system directly underneath the unit. So you wouldn't need to do this drastic septic overhaul in order to accommodate it, which that seems to be one of the problems. And we've pointed him to local architects to help him design something that would be in the character of the village.
There's, yeah, Kristen, you have somebody back
Yeah,
there?
we have, I don't, yeah, okay. Hi, I have two questions, please. Do we have, and if not, do you foresee that we could get an anti-idling law? Okay, we got the jitney, we got the school buses, we got Mr. Softy, we have people in the SUVs, I always say it backwards. They just sit there with the air conditioning on, and you can't even sit in the village anymore. And police officers don't even know. If I ask, I say, is he allowed to do that? They say, gee, I don't know. So I'm wondering. Second question, like you, I'm conservative. I think people should enjoy doing what they want to do on their property. But somebody is spraying for ticks in my neighborhood every day. Every day. And the little signs say, close your windows, keep your pets inside. Is there a way to limit that? Thank you.
So I'll check the code, and if we could pass an anti-idling law in certain locations in the village, but again, enforcement is the key. Like, it has to be enforced. And, you know, I'm trying to rebuild the police force. We're all looking for young officers to step forward. As you know, in the summertime, it's overwhelming. We have 2 squad cars on at a time, and they are constantly being called for service. So yes, we could pass that. And try to enforce it. I mean, to enforce it as best we can. As far as the tick spraying goes, I wanted to ban it throughout the village. I was told I cannot do that because of the state law. The state law, I cannot contradict what the state allows. So I'll give you a story. I work as a plumber. I'm in a house, and I have a helper with me, and the windows were open, and a gentleman comes in to the house and says, "You guys working here?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're working here." It's like, "Well, I just want to let you know I'm going to be spraying for ticks." But it's good, you know, it's not bad for the environment. It's not going to. And you saw the suit that I was in he's in that suit. So he starts spraying. Literally 5 minutes after him spraying, the helper that I was with couldn't breathe. He started coughing. I had to leave. I started like having difficult. We had to leave the job. We had to completely leave the job. So I happen to hate it. I don't like it. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else we could do to keep the tick population down. But to me, to completely toxify everything just to kill a tick, what else are you killing? So.
Can you talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan, and if there's a way through that plan to actually limit growth? I mean, one of the things that we're seeing is new houses are being built, or houses are being bought, sold, and added on to 5, 6 bedrooms. I mean, that increases the population. Then you need more parking places by those houses. Then there's more impermeable paving. We're a dense village. You've said it, and we're much denser than the villages of East Hampton or Southampton. Is there a limit on growth? Can we impose that, and can we do this with this new comprehensive plan?
I think that East Hampton Town recently, in the last 2 months, passed a law or reduced the square footage of what a house could be, right? 10,000. I mean, here's the problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but here's the reality. The reality is that we live, right, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Property owners have certain rights. We can tweak the code and make certain code changes to a certain point. when something, this is how I feel. When something goes before the ARB or the zoning board, the first thing they should look at is, does this structure fit in the character of the village? The houses next to it, the scale of it, the look of it. Unfortunately, once the dominoes start to fall, right, then things get out of control. So it's important for our regulatory boards to make the right decisions when these things go. Here's the other point I want to make. We don't do well when we get sued. If you are a member of a board and you flat out deny somebody and we get sued, most of the time we lose. When it goes to a higher court, they side with the owner, and now we've given away the store. The object of the regulatory boards is not to deny, but to steer the applicant in a certain direction. Maybe make it a little smaller, change the look of it so that it fits in the village. My house, which was falling down, I had to rebuild. It took me 9 months to get a permit. And yeah, because the house was pre-existing non-conforming, went before the ARB, and somebody didn't like the way my windows looked. They wanted a space in between the windows. Okay, seems like an easy thing, right? But I have to go back to the architect. He has to redraw it. He's not waiting he's got other jobs to do. So when he gets around to it, he'll write it up. So I miss 1 or 2 months till I get before the board. Okay, it's good. Now you go to the ZBA. All right, then I went to the ZBA. They're looking at my project. Everybody on the board looks at it. They put it down. The board chairman at the time starts getting into an argument with my architect. He says, are you a engineer? Did you stamp these plans? What do? You drew this up? And they start getting in an argument. And listen, for all the money I paid Dennis Downs, and for whatever he did, his shining moment was he stood up, put his hands out, and said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, what does what you're arguing about have to do with the merits of this, Mr. Gardella's application?" With that, they stopped fighting. I got approved. The chairman resigned shortly after. I come to find out, this fits in Sag Harbor. Come to find out that the chairman's fiancée left him and married my architect. And these are the things that as I lived in this village, and you better, you be careful who you're talking to, because it might be somebody's cousin or somebody's. So, but I finally got my house approved, and I get these big project developers that come to me and they try to tell me, "Oh, well, it's going to be great for the village." I'm like, look, I'm not going to come out for or against. I can't do that as the mayor. But you have to go through the planning board, the ARB, the zoning board. You have to meet all those requirements. If you check all the boxes, then Sag Harbor is going to approve your project. So.
We got one question. I think we'll let that be the last one.
Okay.
Wow.
I just wanted to ask, would it be possible ever for the village to distribute to all the residents fact sheets about stuff like unnecessary spraying for ticks in a village where ticks don't live, and things like the application of glyphosate on a lawn in order to kill weeds, which is a known carcinogen, and endocrine disruptor, and causes Parkinson. And I still can't believe that people can even buy it. But I just think that people don't know about a lot of fundamentals, and were they to be educated. There was a point at which, with the partnership, I did this an architectural walking tour of the village and made pamphlets and asked real estate agents to pass them out, because I was hoping that people, once they were educated, would be less casual about tearing an historic house down to its front door and then pretending to rebuild it in the same style. because it's just revolting. But just trying to err on the side of being generous toward humanity, maybe more informational campaigning on part of the village. Would that be something that you might support?
I've always supported that. We have an environmental action committee. Bob Plum happens to be the liaison, and they come before the board and they speak about issues. But you're talking about putting together like just a broad pamphlet that.
It could be a couple of different things. Maybe once a year that's the environmental thing, and maybe once a year it's something about historic preservation or whatever.
Right.
It could be fun, but it would be good to stores like Nada, I bet, would make them available to people coming in. But just to have something that helps educate people and gives people a sense of how observant this village already is about its character and wanting to save it, that they're not coming into a place that wouldn't care.
Well, I think educating the real estate agents also, because they're like, yeah, you could tear it down and build this, which is, you need to be respectful, especially of the houses that are historically, earmarked. They need to be preserved.
And then fines, higher fines.
Again, like I said,
fabulous.
I think there's a limit to what we can fine.
But
When I talk to the attorneys, this is what they're telling me. We can, we can't just fine them $10,000. I would love to, but, there's a limit to what we can fine under the law.
Yeah. Thanks.
And, to some of these people, it's like, okay, I'll pay the $5,000 fine.
I lied. There's one more. Maybe there are two questions there. Back here, April. To Matthew.
Tom, I've always thought of you as a very discreet guy. I feel I can tell you something and you don't, go off and tell other people. But can you tell us who the architect and the head of the ARB were?
Seriously?
Maybe later.
You want me, well, let me see if I don't know. Somebody could be related to them, Bob.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'll tell you after the meeting.
Mayor Gardella, thank you
Yes.
for sharing your story and all your service as a military and also fire and ambulance. And I really appreciate what you said about that story about John Avalon. I think that discourse is really important. That is our social fabric. It's like where people, different views, communicate. And so I appreciate you, keeping that alive. In terms of like the larger political picture, I'm sort of like wondering, with your experience in the service and your experience as a mayor, could you comment on, I don't know, the president's idea of using the military to police domestically?
What I could tell you is, look, I trained, you saw my training, trained with the airborne. You don't want those guys in it. And I trained with National Guard troops. That is not the purpose of the National Guard. And I see this. I mean, if you want to send federal agents to target certain individuals that are dangerous to the community, okay. What's supposed to happen, the way this is supposed to happen, I could tell you because I know the protocols with the police department, they can ask the local police, can you assist us keeping public safety while we get this gentleman who has a warrant because he's a felon and we need to get him. That's the way it's supposed to work. I don't know of any, what the hell is a National Guardsman going to do except stand there with an, so I am not, that's not, I think that that's not the way to approach it. I mean, if the governor calls and says, look, can you help us with federal troops for a certain crisis or something that's going on, I would say, okay, then send them. But I don't like the look.
There's one over here, and let that be the last one.
But just one last thing I want to say about that. We need to support our law enforcement, and we need the federal government to do that. We need them, they need to come up with a law enforcement bill. put your money where your mouth is. Support these local communities that need more police officers. You know, law enforcement has taken a beating, as you know, over time. And we need to bolster. We're having a hard time finding recruits. We need to build that back up.
Is that because there are less people?
Well, that's a problem too, Nada.
Less people going into law enforcement, or is it there's something where they want to work in a bigger?
I think that the number,
environment,
yeah, I think that trend is starting to change, but it's going to take a while for that to translate into actual officers in the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, you can't do it. You can't do it. It's difficult. And we had a young woman that was Southampton town resident. We sponsored her to go to the academy, and she quit after a week. Said it wasn't for her. But it's not like we're not trying. We're trying to recruit officers. We hired a part-time officer. But to find the people, it's very difficult. That's why affordable housing is such a key issue.
Last question over here.
Thank you for the backstory. My question is kind of twofold. So what did you set as your priority coming into this role? How would you critique your performance to date? And what is your priority going forward?
So, look, the issue, most of this stuff is what I've already talked about. Affordable housing was a big one. Because when I used to sit in the back of the board meetings, when I was fire chief, we took the ADUs and we were telling people you can't even have a water line in there. It's got to be completely stripped. So we've turned that around and given people the opportunity to create. You see all these other issues, how much affordable housing affects that. I did a study to find out how many identified properties that were multifamily, historic, most of them historic, that were in the village. And purchasing the house on 109 Hampton Street was a big one. That actually brought to fruition what my goal was to preserve affordable housing where it is and to find opportunities. Another big priority of mine was the harbor. What's going on in the waters around us? How healthy is the marine life? What pollution is going in there? What can we do to foster a healthy environment around us? So I identified groups like the Back to the Bays, the Cornell Cooperative. We had the South Fork Sea Farmers also. Reached out to them. They're going to do an oyster spat. They got some pushback from the DEC about the location, which I thought was ridiculous. But that's a big one. Stormwater going into the harbor. There's some stuff that's going in there. We need to find out what it is. How can we filter it? Once that harbor goes, we're all gone. So we all have an interest in making sure that pollution doesn't go in there. We did a study probably 10, 12 years ago that identified where the septic systems were that were leaching into the harbor. Most of those septic systems that we're now converting with the sewer expansion were polluting. The nitrogen was going from the septic into the harbor in less than a year. So if you can imagine, once that flow starts, so the sewer expansion project is going to help with that. Most of those areas, or a good portion of them, are going to be tied into the sewer system. Making improvements to the sewer treatment plant. We now have a capital plan to come up. We're identified where we need to improve there. We're putting funds aside, looking for funding resources to improve it. We just put in a filter system, which is double the capacity what was there to filter the smell. Just went in a couple of weeks. You know we had problems with smell this summer.
I miss that smell.
You miss it? The police force is another one. When I came in, we had some issues at the police force, personnel issues that we've now have corrected. I think we're going in the right direction. We need to find more officers. I'm out there trying to recruit officers. That's a big one too. So, you know, I would say those are the top three: affordable housing, the environment, public safety. Big, as you see, I'm involved in it. And I don't know, you want me to give myself a grade on that? I don't know if I can give myself, that's you guys to do that. I'm not. I mean, I would give I'm never going to give myself an A. That's never going to happen. So I would say, I would like to think I got a B or a B minus maybe. There's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.